What is going on, everybody? I am back today to give you guys a list video because recently the film Together has been released, starring Allison Brie and Dave Franco, which is being marketed as a body horror movie that is about relationships. And I am a huge fan of body horror as a genre. I think it's a really incredible way to utilize the filmmaking medium to convey powerful messaging by using like the metamorphosis of the body or the change or decay of the body. And it's always like really visceral when you can use like really disturbing and disgusting imagery to convey a very strong message. It's something that's always worked very well for me. And it's a subgenre of film that I don't always think is appreciated enough. It's one that like it's been in the medium for a very long time, but it's not one that I always feel like is at the forefront. And so today I thought it would be fun to give you guys a list of some of my favorite body horror movies. I'm not going to be able to touch on all of them because I've watched so many of them in my life. I'm going to talk about some of them, and I want to cover different facets of body horror movies because there's like extreme body horror, and then there's body horror that's like more confined and more symbolic of certain elements. And I think it's important to kind of touch on all the different sort of ways that body horror can be utilized and examined. And I'm really looking forward to telling you about some of these movies today. So first up, I have to talk about John Carpenter's The Thing, which I think is one of the most brilliant body horror films ever made. This is obviously one of the most iconic horror films ever created, and I'm not going to go too into detail talking about it, but one of the things that works so well about the body horror element of this is the practical effects. You're isolated in this snowy location. You know there's really no way to escape. This alien force has infiltrated. It can become any human being, and the only way that you know that the person is infected is when they change and try to kill you. And one of the things about body horror, like I said, that really gets me is like visceral, like imagery, like really just disturbing, uncomfortable imagery. And this film is chock full of it. There is so much disgusting, slimy, grotesque imagery that was all done in a practical effects era that I feel like even watching it all these years later, it still holds up brilliantly. I can't ever believe when I revisit this just how incredible a lot of this stuff looks, and the way that the body is able to morph and shape in this is just truly disgusting. And on top of just the body horror elements of the film being great, there's amazing performances, there's great tension and suspense. It leaves you on the edge of your seat up until the very end. It's one of the greatest horror movies ever made, not just body horror. And if you've never seen it before, if you're a horror fan, you have to watch this at least once in your life. Up next is kind of on the inverse of that, which is a horror movie that not a lot of people talk about, which is Brian Yuzna's Society, a film that I have had the pleasure of showing to a lot of people that have made them very physically ill. This has some of the most disgusting body horror practical effects that I've ever seen in a film, but also in a way that comes off as darkly comedic and really sort of sadistic. The movie plays out for the first half as more of a mystery than anything else, and then kind of spirals into complete and total insanity. If you're unfamiliar with Society, it is about a young high school kid who doesn't feel like he belongs. He feels like every element of his life that he's just kind of a loner, and eventually he starts to believe that his family and the people around him might not be who they say they are. And as the film goes on, his sort of questions that he has starts to become truer and truer until we get to this crazy third act that has some of the most gnarly, disturbing, disgusting imagery that I've ever seen in a movie. It is like breathtaking how gross it is. I am always blown away by the visual effects in this movie, like really just some of the best of the best. And it's also genuinely funny in a way that's ridiculous. There's some like truly horrendous and dumb dialogue in this movie that I just appreciate a lot. It's a movie I try to watch at least once or twice a year because I just have so much fun with it. And it's a body horror movie I wish more people would talk about because I think it's fantastic and it's just a really fun watch. Up next is the film Possessor from Brandon Cronenberg. Brandon is really doing a great job kind of following in his dad's footsteps by creating these very visceral, mind-bending horror movies that a lot of times incorporate body horror. And Possessor is the perfect perfect example. It's a movie about a woman who works for an organization that she literally can possess another human being's body to commit assassinations. And the movie starts off as just like it's another person living in another human being's skin, but it becomes much more abstract than that, and it becomes a lot more disturbing and surreal. And there's some really nightmarishly horrific scenes in this movie that have stuck in my brain since the first time that I watched it. And I also think it's a film that has a really interesting conversation around identity. It's really interesting because I look at this and David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future that he made relatively recently, and the themes that both of those films explore when it comes to the idea of identity and identity presentation. And even if you want to dive in and examine it further, sexual identity and orientation, and even in the case of Crimes of the Future, and you could even look at Possessor in those ways, the identity of trans individuals, which I think it's fascinating that the film is able to cover so much just through visual subtext and through the way certain things are conveyed on screen, especially in Possessor with a lot of the relationships that are conveyed in the way that characters feel about one another. I just think that it works really well symbolically and thematically of those things. And the body horror in this and just the way that it's conveyed, it's been seared into my memory since I've watched it. I think Brandon Cronenberg is one of the most promising directors of the future. I've loved his catalog thus far, and I really look forward to seeing what he's going to do in the future. Up next is Yorgos Lanthimos' The Killing of a Sacred Deer. This is body horror in a very different way. You get that slow sort of decay of the human body. If you're unfamiliar with Killing of a Sacred Deer, it's very much paralleled to Greek myth. It is about a surgeon who is hanging out with this kid who his father died under Colin Farrell's character's surgery. He blames him for it and essentially tells him, hey, there's going to be a curse on your family, and you're going to have to kill either your wife or one of your kids in order for the rest of your family to survive. And at first, they'll quit eating, they'll lose the ability to walk, and eventually they'll bleed from the eyes and die. And so, as you're watching this movie, you're like, okay, is this kid making this up? And slowly but surely, the body horror elements start to take place. And I think what really gets me about this is it's basic human function that you're watching these people lose the ability to control. But you, as someone who's experienced, whether you've hurt a leg or you've gone a day where you felt sick and you can't eat or any of these things, you've experienced it. And so when it's showcased in a very extreme manner, it's easy to kind of parallel the experiences there. And what Yorgos does so brilliantly is he presents it in a way that it's visceral and disgusting and disturbing, but also hilarious. And you'll be laughing at things that you probably shouldn't laugh at, which is one of the things that I love so much about Yorgos is like, if you can't laugh at the demented elements of the world, like it's really hard to survive. And so a lot of times you have to laugh at the ridiculous and the absurd. And I think that's what this movie does really well is like, the movies that I love the most are the ones that make me uncomfortable, the ones that make me feel like, what emotion am I supposed to be expressing now? And the way Yorgos is able to kind of play with you as a viewer and say, I'm going to make you feel incredibly conflicted by the way these things are presented. And it really makes for a much more captivating viewing experience and really leaves something on your brain that lingers long after the movie is over. It has brilliant performances. It's one of Yorgos's most beautifully shot films, very Kubrickian. A lot of open headspace, a lot of really beautiful shots that are just masterfully done. I think Yorgos is one of the greatest working directors right now, and I always look forward to what he has to offer. Up next is a small little sci-fi movie from directors that have kind of blown up a little bit, and that's Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson, and that is their film Spring. This is body horror done in a very different way. This is a love story. It starts out to a guy who recently lost his parents, doesn't have a lot of friends, decides to go vacationing in Europe. He meets this young woman. The two of them really start to fall head over heels with each other until he learns a secret about her that is associated with body horror. And I think that it's done in a way that works incredibly well. The way I describe this movie is it's like Linklater's Before trilogy, but done like Cronenberg, where it's like you have this disturbing science fiction element to the film, but it's also incredibly beautiful, and it's done in a way that I think will resonate with you because of the really fantastic dialogue. There's some great performances in this. It's a movie that I've thought about a lot since I've watched it, and it's one that I really enjoy revisiting because I think it just gets better with rewatch. It's very well shot. It's very easy to immerse yourself into the story, and I think it goes in a direction that not a lot of people would expect. And it's just a really great movie. It's one that I really like and I recommend to a lot of people, especially if you're a fan of body horror or science fiction. Up next is Luca Guadagnino's Suspiria, a film that might not necessarily on the surface feel like a complete body horror movie, but has some of the most disgusting, disturbing body horror that I have ever seen. And I think you can really kind of say that this movie is a body horror film overall because it is about dance. And dance is everything about the movement and capturing the movement of the body in a way that is representative of an art form. And there is a scene where someone is doing a dance number that simultaneously the other person is connected to them and gets turned into a human pretzel. It is one of the most disgusting scenes that I've ever seen in a movie in my life. The first time I watched it, I was just like, my jaw was on the floor. I couldn't believe that Luca Guadagnino was able to pull that off. But it's also a beautifully romantic story. It has really great character development. It gets very surreal and wild. I love the risks that Luca takes in the third act. I think he stays so restrained through a lot of the movie and has shocking moments, but really goes for it in the end to where it's just like pulls no punches, does the most absurd thing you can ever imagine. And it's such an immersive film to kind of pour yourself into. It's a movie that I think about like once a week. I have Dakota Johnson's character tattooed on my leg. I love the movie a lot. I think it's brilliant. I think it's one of the most misunderstood horror films of the past 20 years. I think it's better than the original. And it's a movie that I recommend to a lot of people because I think it's really great. Up next, I have to talk about David Cronenberg's Videodrome, probably one of the greatest body horror movies ever made, and a movie that examines a lot of poignant social and political issues in a way that I think is very resonant, especially when it comes to people and their relationship with media as a whole, when it comes to like violence and sexuality and like the human experience surrounding violence and sexuality. A lot of Cronenberg's early work kind of really sort of hones in on those subjects and examines them in a way that makes the audience feel incredibly uncomfortable. But I think it's important as an artist to talk about issues like that that are so very poignant and relevant in society in a way that can resonate with viewers. And there's so many haunting images in this. Obviously, there's a lot of body horror elements of the movie that people like the VHS tape scene that a lot of people have stuck in their brains. But I also think that the movie is just very atmospheric. It does a really great job of pulling you in and kind of keeping you hooked for the entirety of the runtime. I think that it's just absolutely brilliant. One of the best in Cronenberg's entire filmography, one of the greatest body horror films ever made, and one that I think if you are a fan of science fiction or horror, you have to see at least one time. And I could make this list like 20 movies long, but I don't want it to go for forever. So I'm going to do one more today, and I'm going to talk about a director that I really love right now, and that's Julia Ducournau and her film Raw. I could choose from either one of her films, but I think Raw is a much more visceral body horror film for me because it's about cannibalism, and cannibalism is one of the few things in this world that, like, when it comes to movies, even when it's being fictionalized, makes me very ill. I have a very hard time watching this movie, but I think it is brilliantly done. I also think that the way that it sort of looks at this issue as like something that could be inherited or something that would be more genetic is really fascinating. You don't really see movies kind of approach that subject in that way, particularly. I think the lead performance in this movie is absolutely exceptional. I think utilizing something like cannibalism in a coming of age format to kind of just showcase the experience of a person, trying to figure out who they are and embrace their identity and having this whole other element come into play that kind of shakes everything up is just a really fascinating approach to filmmaking, and there's a lot of really interesting ideas here. Truly disgusting imagery, like, and knowing that the character like starts off as a vegetarian and then is like eating raw chicken out of the container to then human flesh. Just some really disturbing, disgusting stuff in this movie, but it's very well done. It's incredibly immersive. I think Julia's one of the most promising directors working right now. I think she's 2 for 2 in my opinion. Cannot wait to see what she makes in the future. Just an incredible talent that does a great job making me feel uncomfortable. So what are some of your favorite body horror movies? Let me know in the comments. These are just some of mine. I could have made a list of like 40 movies long, but I never want to keep you guys here that long. So I hope you appreciate these recommendations and can possibly check out something you haven't seen before. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.